Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the Lord Mayor Appeals Power of Inclusion Program's second webinar of 2025 on artificial intelligence and social mobility. My name is Ian Hedberg, and I'm one of the chairs of the Social Mobility Network at the law firm Ashurst. I also very occasionally moonlight as a projects and energy transition lawyer. It's a real pleasure to be here today to host this panel event on behalf of the Power of Inclusion program, which, as many of you will already know, aims to help the City of London capture the benefits of diversity, equity, and inclusion and create a more inclusive city for all. Some of the tools that the Power of Inclusion use to do that are set out on the slide, which you can see on screen. But if you're interested in learning more, I'd definitely recommend scanning that QR code and having a look at the resource hub. Now, this webinar series is focused on topics within social mobility and aims to give businesses practical solutions to support them to increase opportunities for those from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds progressing in their careers. The theme of today's webinar is the evolving relationship between artificial intelligence and social mobility. So with our panel, who we'll introduce in a moment, we'll be exploring AI's potential impact on the barriers to social mobility and how we can harness it to drive progress, as well as some of the challenges and risks associated with that. And now, for what you have no doubt all been waiting for, before we get to the poll, a few items of housekeeping. You'll be muted throughout the webinar and your video will be turned off. Please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen for questions for our panelists, which we'll get to at the end of the session. Please use the chat to say hi and ask the Lord Mayor's appeal team any questions. And there will also be a couple of instances of polls at the start and end of this webinar, which will no doubt cause me or the team some technical issues. And finally, check out the Lord Mayor Appeals social media handles and share your attendance online to continue the conversation. So we're going to start with a poll which should hopefully appear on screen, asking you how confident are you in your understanding of how AI impacts social mobility within your organization. So just kind of a pulse check on how people feel about that. And I have no idea whether I'll get results on screen or not, but maybe Imogen or Matt will tell me. Doesn't look like we will get results live, but
yeah, I think we've got 46% of people are feeling not at all confident, 28% unsure, 25% somewhat confident, and only 3% who are very confident at the moment.
Amazing. Thank you. Thanks, Imogen. That's really helpful. So with that, I think it's probably time to introduce our panelists. So how about we start with Abu Bakr?
Thanks, Ian. My name is Abu Bakr Mahdi. I'm a partnerships manager at Progress Together.
Thanks, Abu Bakr. Alkeem?
Hi, everyone. I'm Alkim. I'm one of our data and AI strategy leads at Microsoft. And thank you again, Ian and Imogen, for having us today.
And last but not least, Lynn.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lynn, and I'm Chief Exec at the EY Foundation. We're a social mobility charity.
Perfect. Thanks all. Now to kick things off and to hopefully give everyone a little bit of insight into how these two topics of artificial intelligence and social mobility intersect, Abu Bakr is going to give a short presentation on Progress Together's recent research into financial services organizations that are successfully scaling AI, which also looks at some of the key actions that executives can take to promote equitable access and training. So over to you, Abu Bakr.
Great, thank you, Ian. Well, I think just to kind of set the scene before I kind of delve into some of this research, the research that I'm going to be drawing some of these insights from is called Rise with AI. It was developed by Progress Together's partners, Accenture. The team at Accenture worked with a number of people across the sector, looking at professional services primarily and wanting to see how AI is impacting the workforce, particularly thinking about the socioeconomic background. So how does that affect where you come from, what your background is? How is this change in technology and this AI revolution is impacting you? So these are a few insights that I'm going to be referring to here. I think sometimes it's useful to set the context in terms of what we mean by certain terminologies. So when I refer to people from lower socioeconomic background, the definition that we use at Progress Together and the one recommended by the Social Mobility Commission is parental occupation at age 14. And that's a metric that is widely used to understand what someone's socioeconomic background is. A higher socioeconomic background perhaps means more professional working parents, and lower socioeconomic background is what we traditionally understand as working class background, but thinking about people who are in precarious jobs or jobs that do not require a lot of vocational training and do not have a lot of access to training and development and particular kind of literary skills. So this is what we mean when I say lower socioeconomic background, higher socioeconomic background. Looking at the research, so the team at Accenture found that apart from software and platforms, financial services are poised to benefit the most from the AI revolution, whether that's in terms of reducing time that takes up, doing these repetitive tasks, or improve their ability to project and manage their long-term strategies. They are poised to make about 25.8 billion in annual savings. So financial services sector is likely to have a really positive face kind of positive situation with the AI. But the question that comes to mind is who is being left behind in the AI revolution? And I think that's a question worth asking for everyone across the country, because United Kingdom does not have a great sort of reputation in terms of social mobility. I think things have improved a lot, but research at Progress Together tells us that especially in financial services, people from lower socioeconomic background progress 25% slower. And it's not related to job performance or anything other than anything that kind of relates to their job. So there's still this bias and a lot of other things that come in the way of people progressing faster and kind of having an equal access to opportunities. And this continues as they carry on their career. So it's not just about entry; it's about what continues to happen to them. On the next slide, we can have a little bit more of the detailed view. Now, I know that Imogen will share the link to this report, and I think the report delves into a lot of detail. I'm by no means an expert in AI, so my view is particularly from more of a socioeconomic background perspective and what we hear from people and what we understand to be the things that are most affecting them. Employees from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are less likely to use Gen AI tools, and there's quite a big discrepancy of about 10% points in terms of people having access to AI tools. So people from lower socioeconomic background are only 39% likely to have access to AI tools compared to people from higher socioeconomic background, and nearly half of employees, from lower socioeconomic background don't really intend to pursue any skills around AI. So we continue to see that as organizations are investing heavily in this technology, we are seeing that people from higher socioeconomic background who are already kind of sort of in a better position within the workforce, they continue to benefit from it, but people from lower socioeconomic background might be left behind. Another thing that we found in this research was that there was a disconnect in terms of how executives saw the impact of AI and how other people were seeing it. So at lower level, there's a lot of fear and anxiety that AI might take people's jobs away, or they might have their jobs might look completely different. So it's important to build that trust in this technology, and it's important for people to understand what this technology is going to do and the benefit that the corporations are going to get from this technology will also kind of get to them they'll face some of these benefits as well. Um, in terms of kind of delving into what is happening in these organizations, I think every other day there's an AI report that talks about something different. And I don't think that the insights this report is presenting are kind of infallible. So if you challenge any of these things and you think any of this does not resonate with you, please do put that in the chat function. I think we have to be open and honest about it. This is the best that we know from partnering with Accenture that we found. But if there's something else that kind of speaks to you, please do let us know. But broadly speaking, when you speak to people, I think there is anxiety around AI, and there is anxiety around social mobility, especially given that we're not on a level playing field, and people from socioeconomic background who are often in operational roles, they might continue to face a bit of push. And if they are not able to upskill and organizations don't make sure that everyone has equal access to these opportunities, then we might face a future where there's a two-tier workforce where people from lower socioeconomic background are consistently kind of not getting the opportunities they deserve. In the final slide, I think Accenture's put together some very interesting insights on what progressive organizations are doing. So reinforcing readiness, building clarity, I think is quite key here. Equipping employees with AI skills and providing more hands-on learning and bringing them closer to the technology. So it's not something that's wrapped in this mystique, and it's kind of demystifying it and understanding what the use case looks like, particularly for their roles as well. Inspire confidence in people, and that's again by building greater trust, showing how AI is enhancing productivity and not replacing humans, understanding what human skills are invaluable and ones that organizations can't exist without. For example, we know that empathy and emotional connection and relationships, that is something we need human intuition for. And understanding how you can use AI better to actually strengthen your own career, your own skill set is quite important. Strengthening the governance of AI so it's not out of control. People trust the technology, I think is quite important. And finally, they have said that empower employees with more opportunities, bring them closer to the technology, but also allow them platforms to raise their voices and concerns, and also have an ability to interact with executives and talk about what they are facing more generally. More details on this are in the report. I'll just end this bit here. I'm looking forward to the questions, and if anyone has any differing views, then please do share them.
Thanks very much, Abubakar. That was really interesting. I think I'm really glad that you did that kind of health warning on the kind of statistics and the kind of differing views that you see online and in articles and in reporting around social mobility and AI. I think it's hard not to kind of get an overload of information on these things, and it's hard to know what the right story is. So we're now going to invite Lynn and Alkim to join Abubakar on the virtual sofa for the panel section of this webinar. So if you can all just imagine the three of them lounging back on a kind of Graham Norton-esque couch in your mind's eye, that would be very helpful. Maybe picture me in some kind of red velvet suit jacket, glass of wine in hand. So if everyone has that in mind, I think we'll start with Abubakar again. And just before we delve into the discussion focused on kind of artificial intelligence, I was hoping we could just kind of step back and talk about the wider context of social mobility at the moment. So it'd be great if you could share some of the general trends we're seeing, and perhaps tie that back to some of the statistics you shared on that second slide about employees from lower socioeconomic backgrounds being less likely to use Gen AI tools and feeling less confident in using them as well.
That's for me, Ian, right?
Yes, correct.
I think the broader context, I can only speak for the remit that we have at Progress Together, and our focus is on financial services companies. We have about 59 members, and we carry out research every year. We look at where the sector is heading as a whole with regards to socioeconomic diversity, and we focus on the senior levels. And the reason for that is we see that the sector often acts like a bit of a leaky bucket, frankly, because we see all kinds of talent coming into the sector, but rarely do we see a huge diversity of backgrounds at the senior level. So senior level leadership positions are, according to our latest research, predominantly held by people from higher socioeconomic backgrounds. And what we want from our member firms, what we want for the sector, is that everyone has equal opportunities to progress. We remove the biases. We make sure that job allocation and processes for promotion are transparent. It's not about who you know, it's about what you know. It's not about networks, and it's not about sponsors. It's about your merit and understanding and being conscious of the different skill set that different people bring into the sector. So I think the broader context of social mobility is quite important, because we are already seeing that there is a lack of representation at the senior levels, which impacts all of us. People in financial services make decisions that affect all of us, and they affect beyond the boundaries of this nation, right? So they have a huge impact on millions of people's lives, and we want to make sure that when these decisions are being made in those rooms, there's a fair representation of all of us. There's people from all backgrounds coming in there with ideas, just so we don't have any blind spots, and we are thinking about things in a unique way. We don't have that, a group think in that room. So understanding why this is important, I think social mobility in the context of socioeconomic diversity, I think is quite an important point, because it's sometimes we just think about, if someone has an opportunity to hire 10 graduates, that's great. Well, where would they go then? What would happen to them? We often see that, but that people do enter the sector, but then they're progressing slower, they're demoralized, they feel like, I'm not going to be at the top. And that's not great for anyone, and not for organizations spending all these resources, and not for the people. So understanding how AI is impacting this specific cohort of people, I think is quite important in kind of making policies that would impact things in the long run. And I think more broadly thinking about socioeconomic diversity and social mobility in the country, I think it's a debate that we don't see often enough. I think there is focus, and I think there is discussion, but if we are to look at the news reports, we are continuing to see there's a squeeze on entry-level jobs. We continue to see that there's mass layoffs at firms, and I think these are the kind of things that make people anxious about technology. Sometimes not for the right reasons, but often because of what they read and what they find on podcasts and on the internet around how this technology might completely change their lives. And when you don't feel in control, that's when you feel anxious, right? So understanding why this is happening, and also finding ways to communicate it better, finding ways to make sure that this technology is not just one of those new tricks with which sort of people get pushed back again, just to make sure that this is something that pulls people out of these kind of situations where they are stuck in their career for 10 years and not getting progression. So I think that's quite an important context. And I know Lynn and Alkim have a lot of insight on both of these issues.
Yeah, I think thank you, Abubakar. I think that's a really useful segue into my next question, which I probably want to hear from all of you on, but let's start with Alkim and then Lynn maybe. But from each of your perspectives, what are some of the opportunities for AI to transform social mobility, and what are some of the potential risks?
Look, I think today we really have more access than we've ever had to education. I think when I look at the opportunity, we really have the significant impact where we can democratize learning. We have more tools, more agents, and more resources available at our disposal, which is great, because one of these huge barriers in terms of underrepresentation is limited access to digital skills, to education. Obviously, that comes with a lot of risk, which, I know we're discussing today in terms of, one, there's going to be bias when we look at these baked algorithms and models used in education tools and recruitment. And then we can still experience access gaps, whether that's across devices, connectivity, infrastructure. So although there's a lot of opportunity, there's also a lot of inherent risk that's going to come with it. But I feel very optimistic about our opportunity, especially when it comes to education. That's my perspective.
Thanks, Alkim. Lynn, did you want to come in on the same question?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to back Alkim up here. I think there's a huge potential for AI to kind of address social mobility. I mean, I'm coming at it from the sort of the early talent pipeline and education within schools. And I think that accessibility point is a really, really important one. I mean, most young people that come from low income backgrounds don't have access to personalized learning or tutoring, for example. And there are some amazing ed tech platforms out there now which utilize AI to do exactly that, to like really personalize the learning journey for that young person. So if they're struggling with a certain, I don't know, aspect within maths, for example, they can present it in a different way and it can track their journey and their learning journey and kind of model it to suit their needs and their interests. I think also, you know, there are a lot of different barriers that young people face. I mean, one in nine young boys are colorblind. And using some of these amazing edtech platforms, you can, for example, even just change the way really quickly information is presented to them, so that if they have that, then the font can be changed into different colors. Or if you're dyspraxic, it could be read out loud to you. So I think there's all sorts of accessibility opportunities that come with some of the utilization of AI. I think really importantly, it empowers educators. There is so much admin that our teachers are doing through marking, lesson planning, all of this kind of stuff. But again, there are some brilliant tools out there that can create lesson plans, are interactive, brilliant, vibrant, fun, engaging for the young people, that can be like literally produced for them in 3 minutes, which give them so much more time when they're teaching to spend one-on-one with their young people and kind of really doing that human interaction, developing those soft skills that employers often tell us are missing. I think the other thing that I would say is most of the state schools, so most of the young people that we work with come from free school meal backgrounds, and they have no careers teachers within schools. So they have no real access to anyone talking to them about the different careers and the pathways that are out there for them. They have a limited view of what they see within their day-to-day life and those within their network and the jobs that they're in. But again, I've seen some amazing tools out there that are doing really fantastic jobs at showcasing the opportunities, the pathways for young people, and really importantly, making the curriculum tangible. So for example, I don't know, if you were sitting in a physics lesson being taught about the atom, you might be like, okay, why am I ever going to need to learn about the atom? But then actually you can fast forward to a video from, I don't know, nuclear or Rolls-Royce, where they're showcasing how they're being a nuclear physicist in a, I don't know, the next Hinkley Point C, these kind of things. So it makes the curriculum really tangible for young people. I think the other thing as well, I would say that is an opportunity for AI, which I don't think we've harnessed yet, is really thinking intelligently about the skills demand and forecast. So one of the things that we do at the foundation is work really closely with employers to kind of reverse engineer their pipeline to know, okay, you're going to expand in X, Y, and Z places in the next 10 years. What are the job roles you're likely to have? X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, that means we need to be in primary schools now. If I go to nuclear as the example again, we need to be in primary schools now, teaching them and getting them excited about STEM. So I think there's a way that we can intelligently use all of this vast information that is out there to sort of plug some of these gaps. That being said, you asked about risks as well, Graham Norton, and I think there are a few. Alkin talked about them, that kind of bias. It's not just within the recruitment stage, it's within the educational tools with the sort of the marking, all of that kind of stuff. So that's got to be watched out. I think the other thing is I really hope we don't see an over-reliance on AI tools in education. So, for example, there are amazing AI tools out there at the moment that are teaching around science, and as an example, we know there's a huge lack of science teachers across the UK. What I hope we don't see is it's okay for that AI tool to plug a couple of lessons, maybe when a teacher's off sick, but not to plug the resource gaps permanently. So I hope we don't see an over-reliance on AI to kind of plug some of these resourcing gaps and skill shortages that we're seeing at a teaching level. And then just to back up what Abubakar said as well about that kind of inclusivity, at the moment, young people, particularly those from low income backgrounds, they're not really being thought about within the context of AI development. So use cases certainly don't have them at the heart and center. So I think there's work for us to do around involving young people in shaping these technologies and kind of identifying risks to mitigate them.
Yeah, I think that over-reliance point for me is a really, really critical one, because I mean, take the point that it's kind of a point in schools, but also I think there's a real concern at kind of entry-level jobs that that over-reliance on AI will mean that actual job opportunities get replaced with AI roles. And I think we've got to get the message across that to executive. I think that that over reliance could mean you end up with a real skill gap in years to come. Abubakar, did you want to come in on kind of opening statements? I know you've had one opportunity, but
No, I think I completely agree with everything that Alkim and Lynn have said. But just to kind of take it forward at one point, I think there's there's a broader need for corporations, organizations, businesses, and governments to take responsibility to make sure that the benefits of AI will be spread equally. I think that's something we need to be mindful of. I think this is going to be once in a lifetime revolution, and God knows what we're going to be saying in 30 years time, 40 years time, thinking about, what happened in 2025 when all of a sudden, the AI took over everything. So we just want to make sure that people who are actually in power, in positions of influence, are conscious of these issues and also talking about it and proactively working to make sure that it benefits everyone. So there's no doubt that it has tremendous potential to do so. We just need to make sure that we are conscious of the negative effects it could have, and increase accessibility. I think that's a huge issue, continues to be a huge issue, where people sometimes don't know about AI beyond ChatGPT. So just understanding what it really means and how many different models are out there and different technologies out there, I think that's quite important as well.
Yeah, thank you. And if I just try and sum all of that up in one kind of pithy statement, I think really what we're saying is that AI has a real potential to be a kind of force for good, but it needs to all be handled in the right way to ensure that it kind of pushes us in the right direction rather than the wrong direction. Alkeem, I think I'm going to ask you a question in that same vein, which is we've kind of spoken a little bit about how AI tools can perpetuate human bias. So what practical steps can organizations take to reduce bias when using AI to support things like recruitment and other processes in the businesses?
This is a great question. So reducing AI bias in recruitment is a key pivotal area for organizations. And I just want to set the context in terms of when we talk about, AI model bias, it really starts with the data. So as an employer, if your historical data reflects bias, if it lacks modality, then you're going to see the results from the AI model reflected back. So when we talk about bias, it is not just within the agents that we deploy, but it's also about the human in the loop systematic approach that we're taking. And I want to share just a few steps today with the audience that we have in terms of a few initial practical approaches that we can take today. And I would love to, get questions on it and hear everyone's perspective. The first thing that we recommend is that you really need to audit your data as an organization. So you can begin with a bias audit, think of it as part of your existing compliance system and framework. And you need to look at the historical data auditing to look at the skews. So for example, do you tend to have hiring towards a certain demographic, a certain socioeconomic background? That is going to give you indications in terms of signaling mobility. That is the first thing. And especially if you are using a vendor, a third-party supplier to look at that data, you need to be asking those type of questions in the auditing. The second thing I would say, which we've kind of discussed, today across the panel, is it's really important to diversify the leadership and the decision makers across your organization. And that doesn't just mean that it has to be HR, it actually has to be end to end from your developer team to HR to finance. And it's really important for organizations to ensure that they have a diversity and inclusion lead and representation across all, because that is going to help understand some of those biases earlier on rather than seeing it, across the results or the quarterly impact. And the last thing I would say, linking to this is, when we talk about bias, again, we talk a lot about the models that we're deploying, but the human in the loop, the user testing is so incredibly important, and we take it very, very seriously at Microsoft. And it's really important for all organizations to include feedback testing across users. So think about the surveys that you can do, the testing that you can incorporate across that process, and really be critical in terms of the questions that you are asking and be critical in terms of that process. So that's kind of how I would approach it pragmatically. I think it really comes down to the data that you're feeding the model. That's my perspective.
Thanks very much, Alkeem. And Lynn, what concerns do you see around young people's access to skills for an AI-enabled future? I think looking at the Q&A as well, we've got some questions already in that kind of vein, so it'll be interesting to kind of delve into that a little bit further later.
Yeah, so I mean, digital poverty, it's an obvious one to say, but it's still such a huge issue across the UK. So, the reality is, in some of the more affluent schools, young people have got individual iPads and these kind of things. And you contrast that to schools in less affluent areas, and they've got literally one computer from 15 years ago for a whole class of 30. So the actual access to young people, to hardware, to software isn't there at the moment. In parts of the UK, connectivity to the internet is still really, really, really bad. So I think we need to not presume that just because everyone is a sort of digital native these days, that they have access to the hardware, the software, the connectivity. But I think an important thing for me is, to a certain extent, that's the easy bit to fix. I think actually we could throw some money and some investment at that and actually intelligently deploy that to the areas that need it. And we could kind of address that problem. But I think one of the things that we've found is that's not necessarily going to fix everything. So to give you an example, we did a project a couple of years ago where we were exploring how the metaverse was being used in the future of work with some of our young people, because a couple of years ago it was the next shiny thing, and they loved it. They were like, oh yeah, this is great, I can really understand how employers are going to use it, but it's not going to be for people like me, and it's not going to be for my communities. And that, for us, set alarm bells ringing off, because it's the same thing we hear with young people thinking that they can't walk into EY or any other kind of corporate with a big shiny office. They just automatically feel excluded. So there's something around, even if we give the hardware, software, the connectivity to the young people, if they feel excluded from the outset, it doesn't matter if you give them all that, they're not going to engage with it. So there's something around, it's called intrinsic motivation, I guess, that kind of ability for young people to kind of be adaptable and not feel excluded. And I think that is a much deeper issue that we need to, and cultural issue that we need to address. I don't have all the answers now because we've seen it's a problem. We are doing some work with the Institute for the Future of Work. It's in its infancy, but you can learn more about it on LinkedIn and all that kind of jazz, and we can keep you posted. But I think that kind of lack of that exclusion for me is a really, really important thing. And I think maybe the other, again, is that kind of over-reliance. It's a word we've used a couple of times, but I think what we don't want to do is shift too far in the curriculum to all the like technical heavy kind of aspects of learning. So like, okay, coding, tech prompt engineer, all this. Yeah, it's great to kind of understand that, but actually that in reality, that's not what we're going to need in the workforce in 10 years time. So I'm hoping that we don't over influence on the technical side to the detriment, I guess, of the human-centric skills. So that ability to kind of be creative, to analyze, to adapt, all of these kind of, the soft skills as they're called, which I hate that word because I think it diminishes them. But I think it's really, really important that we don't pivot too far and really, really do focus on the human-centric skills, because it's not going to be AI on its own. It's going to be humans plus AI. So those human-centric skills are going to be really, much more important. So I think it's just important we don't over-egg the technical skills too much.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with that message, Lynn. Abhibak, I want to come back to you just because I think that's quite a nice segue off the back of Lynn's discussion there to talk about trust issues that employees might have with AI. Your research looked at some of those trust issues, and I was hoping you could share more about those findings and why addressing trust is so critical.
Sure, I think so. The report found that 58% people fear AI could lead to job displacement, and I think that's a number. I don't know if it's gone up or down since, but it is something that people often talk about with us, that they think that they are in these highly technical, as Lynn was talking about, highly technical jobs, that they now think where there were 4 people working, maybe there is a need for 2 people now because AI is being used to sort of enhance productivity. So I think, how do people understand what is the best avenue for them to pursue next? How can they use their existing skills or upskill in a way that would continue to provide them with good job opportunities? I think it's quite critical to think about the broader technology. AI will be, at this point in time at least, AI does not have that empathy, compassion, ability to connect with people, ability to have a nice, friendly conversation. And we all know how important that is in the world of work and in our own personal life as well. The ability to connect with someone or have a nice chat with someone and joke or laugh amidst a tense formal meeting, I think is all that really matters. You know, that's what makes you almost happy at the end of the day and get satisfaction from your job. So being able to have these kind of people who have that human touch, who have a good bedside manner with stakeholders, is going to be critical for organizations across the board. So how do we reinforce the importance of these human skills or these human traits that perhaps AI does not have for now? Can't imagine it ever having that in the future as well, but we never know. The other thing about culture, I think, is quite important, and Lynn touched on that really brilliantly. It reminds me of a conversation I had with a senior associate from a Magic Circle firm, and they said they had children from a relatively deprived area of London come into one of their offices. And they said the children, all of these young people, they were incredibly tense throughout the whole day. Like they were so nervous, so anxious. And he picked on this thing that he said that they were afraid to touch things. That I found almost they were scared that they'll break something. Like they wouldn't even touch like the lift button or anything. And it just told them that they felt out of place there. And that was not the purpose of that visit. You know, of course, the purpose of the visit was to make them feel like, you know, they could be working here someday, and they belong here as much as anyone else. But I think that culture gap still exists, where people in some parts of the country, many parts of the country, and young people particularly, are very sensitive and might think this is not for me and self-censor themselves, despite all the incredible skills and talents they have. So I think culture is quite an important element here. A broader discussion about where we are going as a society, how inclusive we really are, and understanding what connects us is, of course, you know, a lot bigger than what separates us. So leveraging those things is quite important, and just understanding AI is just one of these technologies. Before that, it was the internet, or blockchain was all over the place. You know, there were apps being launched every other day, a decade ago. So these technologies do exist, and perhaps AI is the biggest of them all. But ultimately, it is about human life and human existence that we want to make sure people continue to live happy lives and continue to do jobs that give them satisfaction. And that would require equity of opportunities. It would require conscious effort by people in power, but also all of us to continue to talk about these systems and make sure that they are fair.
Thank you, Rebecca. And that point you've just made about the kind of fear of touching things is a really interesting one. We have something called Access Ashurst, which is a similar scheme to what it sounds like you're talking about there. I've never noticed that particular behavior, but it's really interesting to see the kind of difference between those students who come in that process and then the kind of more kind of graduate level, entry level roles that come back in, and hopefully there's a translation of a few of those people from the Access Ashurst program into those starting roles as well. But there's a real shift in the kind of attitude. That's an interesting point that I'd not come across before. Alkeem, so I'm going to come back to you because I think Abubakar talked briefly there about kind of upskilling the workforce in AI. But I just want to drill down into kind of what that means in practice for employers considering fair access to skills development opportunities.
Sure. So I think, in terms of skilling, as we kind of discussed, I really think that it's one of the biggest opportunities that we have, but it needs to be done in a systematic way. And I think for employers, there's two perspectives. One, there's the accountability of upskilling existing talent that you have in your organization. And then two, there is the, approach of making sure that you are creating access to new talent coming in from the market. So in terms of the first perspective, The two, practical perspectives that we really recommend to organizations is one, I think there's a misconception that AI upskilling, and Lynn, pointed out to this as well, is only for tech teams or it's only for, coding or, DevOps. And actually, it really is about giving access to all levels and roles. So across an organization, sometimes we see a lot of the investment in the skilling and education being reserved for software engineers, or it could be more technical teams, data scientists, but actually where we see the most return is employers that are investing across all levels and across all roles. So that would be my first recommendation in terms of make AI learning available to all and make it part of the onboarding to your organization, make it embedded. And there's a lot of tools that you can use today, like across LinkedIn. You can use, Copilot for free for a certain amount of time and usage. So we have more access than ever to make sure that we're accountable and make sure that we're integrating. The second thing that I would say that I've seen to be really helpful is that make AI usage in the actual work and performance reviews. So that's something that we're actually doing across Microsoft and some of our partners where we're measuring usage. And we always, and it could just be a roundtable conversation, or it could be, just with your manager to say, hey, I've used, this agent to help me complete my work 2 times faster. Really making it an embedded approach in terms of your day-to-day job, I think is going to expand on the fairness point that we discussed. And then from the other perspective, which I think is the more difficult one to resolve, is how do we ensure access to talent that is within the market? So for that, we really need to make sure that organizations are being incorporated, one, to the courses that we have available, but also, as part of D&I think organizations are going to have more and more allocation when it comes to looking at boot camps, looking at joint partnerships, apprenticeships, and really expanding into that, which is going to help the early, in career point that we discussed, right, where there's a lot of anxiety around that at the moment. So really making it an embedded part of your D&I strategy rather than just a tech strategy approach. Those are some of my thoughts.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think that point about kind of embedding it early is so critical as well, right? Because as we all know, your work habits form from the day one of your job. And I think if you can kind of embed that within the kind of next generation of people coming through, then hopefully that means that they will also start to kind of embed it in the generation above them as well, in addition to kind of making sure that you also roll out that same level of training with the people who are already in the existing business. Lynn, you work closely with young people, supporting them to succeed at the next generation of talent. How are you supporting them to be prepared for the future of work?
Yeah, so I think it's important that there's no like magic silver bullet here, and I don't think AI is going to necessarily be the magic silver bullet that overnight like addresses social mobility. One of the things that we are very much aware of is, there are brilliant ed tech platforms out there. There's loads of amazing kind of increasing access to things like career pathways and talks, etc. But nothing really beats, from the feedback that we've had from young people, from the feedback we've had from teachers, from the feedback we've had from employers, nothing at the moment really beats those face-to-face interactions between young people and employers. So one of the things that we do, which is like a key part of our program, is we get young people in and we give them 5 days of paid employability skills training, and then they go off and they do their paid work experience placement with a business. And we deliberately do 5 days of the paid employability training because there is such a lack of sort of careers advice and guidance within schools. And this is not a criticism of schools at all, because teachers are flat out. It's just there's not the resource there. We found that we can't just take a young person who's got no experience of, I don't know, even traveling into, say, London City. We can't just take them from school and then just plonk them, I don't know, in an Ashurst, for example, and expect them to thrive and the employer to get the most from it. It just doesn't work because, back to Abaka's point around they didn't want to, some of the young people we have on our programs won't come through the door until we come and get them to bring them in. So the confidence and that sense of belonging is something that it takes time and can't just be solved by one kind of quick intervention or half an hour careers presentation talk. So I think my encouragement is to businesses, like, please focus on getting into schools and getting in early. I think all schools are different. They're at different stages. So we work really closely with schools to understand, okay, well, what is it? What are the gaps that you think your students need? For some, we will go in and we will do like AI literacy training, but for others, it could be something completely different. So I think it's about adapting. I think one of the things that I think is important to note as well, again, it goes back to this digital natives point. Everyone kind of thinks that because they're digital natives, they are automatically can just come into the place of work and just hit the ground running. But the reality is, yeah, they might be using TikTok, but they don't use Outlook. So you need to train across all these kind of basic digital platforms. Zoom, Teams, it's not in their kind of everyday usage. So it's about kind of sometimes going back to basics. We also teach young people when they come on our programs how to use different AI models, but also to analyze it. So EY's got its own particular AI model called EYQ. So we get them to play around on that, just have a go at it and explore it. And I think that's really, really important. And the feedback that we've had from young people is it's just that time to kind of explore, the pressure being off, not to kind of explore because they've got to do presentation in 10 minutes, but giving people I don't think this is just young people, the kind of room to explore and confidence to know that they're not going to break something if they get in and they have a go. One of the other things we're doing is, I'm 42, so I'm not in the school system, and I haven't been in the school system for a long time. So I don't want to presume that we have all the answers. So we do a lot of co-design with young people. We've got a youth voice forum. We've got young trustees on our board, all of this kind of good stuff. They actively help us to kind of shape our programs. But we also listen to employers, because I think the problem is it's great to listen to young people and get their thoughts and feedback. But often the other side of the market, i.e. the employers, is missing. So it's about how we join those together. And AI is a big part of that. But there is so much more beyond the kind of AI literacy training that we really need to address if we're going to crack social mobility.
Thanks, Lynn, and thanks for clarifying that you're not of school age as well. You have to be one of the most well-informed and well-spoken school students I've ever come across. But okay, we've now got some time for some Q&A from the audience. So I'm going to cherry pick a few questions because we don't have that much time, and there's quite a few questions to get through. Pick up first Charlotte's question. So interested to hear the panelists' views on how employers will absorb the business case and make a positive decision to keep entry-level opportunities in place when there are AI tools, resources, and agents that might be able to perform tasks usually reserved for first jobs. So kind of open to the floor, but I mean, we've touched on this already, but I think it's an important question, so we should come back to it a little bit.
I think I can talk a little bit about the sort of conversations we are having with some of the business leaders, and I hope most of us can appreciate that businesses are quite strongly skewed towards profits. So whatever generates profits is obviously the most enticing option. But what we really need in this day and age is for leaders to think long term and think about the long term strategic objectives of their organizations and what serves them best, and think not just about this wave of technology, but what's to come next. Who do they want their future leaders to be, and what do they want them to look like? And I think all of these things are quite important when you think about either adding or reducing entry-level jobs. So what I think perhaps we should urge businesses at this point in time is just think long term. Just make sure that you're making decisions that are not reactive, but are well thought out and are in the best interest of not just your stakeholders, but also the society in which you exist. Because ultimately, that's also part of the corporate responsibility.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. It's the kind of tempering the excitement that some people feel about AI with a sense of caution and that kind of responsibility, as you say, Abu Bakr. Kim, did you want to come in on that one as well?
Yeah, I would just add to that, and we kind of discussed this today as a panel, but I think this is where, it's really important to incorporate it as a D&I framework and not just a tech strategy or just a recruitment framework, because that's where you can really impose accountability and you can really review the uptake of early and career talent, which is still incredibly important. So that would kind of be one point that I would add, is when we make it a part of the DNI goal, that's where we really see impact.
Yeah, thanks very much, Alkeem. I think we've probably got time for one more question. So I'm going to go for Terry's question. So AI has the ability to allow people to leapfrog privilege, but it also has the ability to enforce privilege. It seems that access and understanding are key to success. What is one practical thing that we can do to improve access and understanding and ensure that AI creates frogs? Referring back to the leapfrogs, if that wasn't clear. Lynn, I might start with you for the kind of school angle, if that's all right.
Yeah. And I take it we're answering from an employer perspective. I mean, I think for me, access full stop is the fundamental thing, but I think that should be happening at a government level. I guess so my thing would be businesses getting into schools. Don't rely on AI and teachers and the school system to produce young people that are ready for the workforce, because there is so much that schools are having to juggle. So don't rely on technology to kind of solve all of the issues. Still get into schools, still engage with young people face to face, because I think that's where we do the blend of utilizing AI, but also that face to face, that kind of interaction where we'll see the leapfrogs.
Perfect. Alkeem, Abubakar, any thoughts to add? Or
I agree with Len. I think maybe one perspective that I would add is, I think we have a lot of opportunity as individuals. So one practical thing you can do today, for example, is we have a lot of training courses on LinkedIn for free. So enabling ourselves is one of the key, pivotal aspects where we can frog jump, per se, to play to that analogy. So really, leveraging time for that reskilling and making it part of your working day is super, super important.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think for me at least, and perhaps for other people on this call as well, our initial conception of what AI is comes from perhaps sci-fi or the Terminator movies, and it always is a villainous technology. That's how we think about it. But also, it's all something that's wrapped in mystique. It's mysterious. And then people love to throw around these phrases and words that sometimes kind of enhance that. Some people who perhaps would be kind of making us think about AI in ways that might not be helpful. So I think firstly, it's really nice to know that there's people out there like Alkeem talking about it in a way that's easily accessible and understandable. But also, as Alkeem pointed out, there's resources available for free, made available by Microsoft. I think Google's got some free courses as well. There's some courses on Coursera as well, where you can just learn about the technology and just understand what it can do and what it can't do. I think use case is quite important. I think otherwise it's just abstract faff. It's what is it about? So once you kind of make sure that young people understand exactly what they can use AI for, give them examples, give them inspiration to play with it, I think that would probably make the biggest difference.
Perfect. I think that's a nice positive point to end it on, actually. And I'm glad that you went for Terminator as the example. In my head, whenever I think of AI, the first movie I go to is Blade Runner, which I think makes me seem older than I am. All right, so we'll kind of wrap up the panel discussion there, and I just wanted to give a quick overview of what's next for the Power of Inclusion and the resources that are available on the Power of Inclusion Hub. So on September 25th in London, we have the next roundtable discussion workshop on inclusive hybrid working practices, which promises to be a really engaging discussion. That's an in-person session. And then you can sign up to the Power of Inclusion Hub to see previous webinars, including this webinar if you want to watch it back, events, features, and resources on delivering a storytelling campaign to support your social mobility strategy. Please tell your colleagues about the Power of Inclusion and the resource hub, which will be in the slides. That QR code will be there. And please do get in touch with the Power of Inclusion team if you have any questions or would like to discuss the program. And please let us know if there's anything in particular you'd like to see discussed at the next event. We've now got a poll which should be flashing up on screen. We've also had some very, very useful feedback in the chat and on the Q&A. So thank you very much for that. But this poll is just intended to kind of capture that feedback in a more statistical fashion, and then there's an opportunity for you to kind of include some further thoughts. But I will let you crack on with doing that feedback, and take the opportunity to just say a massive thank you to all of our panelists, to Abubakar, Akeem, and Lynn. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. And thank you very much to the Power of Inclusion team, to Imogen and Matt for running this and making it all go so smoothly. And hopefully I'll see you all at the next Power of Inclusion workshop in September. Thanks very much all.
Thank you.
That's all.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.